Hello everyone, I'm Revati and welcome to our Mother's Day special conversation on raising financially confident families. On today's show, we are celebrating Mother's Day by looking at the many roles mothers play in shaping families, values, and even financial futures. And joining me is someone who brings a really unique blend of professional insight and lived experience. We have with us Aarti Tibrewala Darooka, a chartered accountant, entrepreneur, educator, author of The Cost of Having a Baby. She's also the founder of Women Matters and the Family Business Clarity Lab, working closely on financial awareness and family decision making. Today, with Aarti, we are sitting down for a real, honest conversation about the experiences and learnings that come together in a mother's journey with money, life decisions, and everything in between. Aarti, it's lovely to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Revati. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Aarti, before we get into your professional journey, can you tell us a little bit more about how motherhood has changed you? What has motherhood brought to you?
I'm someone who always aspired to be a mother, but what motherhood has done for me is that it has helped me to sharpen the edges. Whatever becoming a chartered accountant, being a professional, being an entrepreneur taught me, motherhood helped me enhance it. Because the one thing that motherhood gives you is the ability to multitask. As a mother, your antenna are always on. You are more alert than you've ever been in your life. You are more aware of your surroundings. And these are all traits that help you professionally as an entrepreneur and in your life. While a lot of your focus as a mother goes into your children, but the fact that you're honing these traits morning, day and night, every living moment as a mother, these really carry you through everywhere in life. Like even as an employer, I find that mothers are usually my best assets because they value their time more than anybody else in the office.
You've been a mother, you're a mother of three. So, has there been something that has changed the way you think about money or planning for the future, once you became a mother? What was that one change that motherhood brought to you when you think about money?
Actually, that change doesn't happen overnight in one single phase. There are different phases to that change and your relationship with money that come about in different stages of parenting. Initially, when you become a parent, from the moment that you find out you're pregnant, your immediate default response is saving, right? Putting together corpus for the delivery, for the baby's immediate needs, and then suddenly you realize you want to plan for your child's future. That is your first change. Then, once you've had the child has started going to school, you realize that while putting away money for the future is important, staying liquid is equally important because having a baby is an expensive affair. You need money on a day-to-day basis, right from the supplements, to the classes, to the school fees, to the clothes, to the birthday parties. So then your second change comes in realizing that you have to balance future with present needs. The third phase of that change comes when you realize that it's not just about your baby's needs. It's not just about your child's needs. You can never give from an empty cup.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big believer that the fuller your cup, the more you're going to be able to give your child. An unhappy mother can never have happy children. So that third phase of the change for me as a parent came about when I realized that I had to take care of myself before I could begin to take care of my children. So my needs, whether it was making it to the gym, paying for a gym membership, making sure I got the right supplements, buying that dress that, I kept thinking I wanted to buy but I kept putting off. Those are the small things that I realized I had to do for myself if I was going to be a present and happy mother. So that change as a mother doesn't come in one phase, it's an ever-evolving process.
Great. So, Aarti, your journey with money started very early on in life. I remember you telling me someday that you started by saving your Rakhi money when you were very little.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us a bit more about what that experience, taught you? How did you, how did your journey evolve with money?
So, in a traditional Indian family, one of the basic things, your first tryst with money as a child is usually Raksha Bandhan, or whether, it could be Eid, it could be Christmas, whatever, right? Because your elders give you money as gift. Now, I was raised by a very strong woman. My mom is someone who always told me that as a woman, your hand should always be turned towards giving, not just for asking. You ask for your right, but you are always going to have to be in a position to give when you want to give. You may come from a very wealthy family, but if you're going to have to ask for money every time you want to make a choice, then you are, as a person, are not wealthy. So even as a kid, when I would get that money for Rakhi and I would get money on prize day in school, my mom would say, why don't you put it away and we'll see what we can do with it later. We used to have something called National Savings Certificates in the 90s and in the early 2000s. So one fine day I realized I had 7,000 rupees in my little purse, and my mom said, why don't we put it into the NSC? By the time you finish your 12th standard, you'll get twice the amount of money. Now imagine being, a 12, 13-year-old girl and being told that at 15 years of age or 16 years of age, you'll have like 15,000 rupees. It sounds like a lot of money even today, right? So I did that. I went to the nearby post office, put all of that into an NSC. I finished my 12th, and at 18, I got 15,000 back. Now, at that point also, I could have chosen to splurge that money, but something at the back of my mind said that I want to do something else with it. And those were the days when, the entire Indian ecosystem was opening up, when IPOs were beginning to become a big thing. So with that money, I went and bought into my first IPO.
At 18?
At 18 years
Wow.
of age. So I finished my 12th in science, went on to do CA. And obviously I was surrounded by a lot of these, young kids who were very aspirational about the booming Indian ecosystem in the early 2000s. So that seemed like the logical thing to do. I went and bought into my first IPO, and against saner advice, I actually held on to those shares for a very, very long time. But when I finally sold those shares, which I had bought for less than 15,000 rupees, I actually made almost 20 times the money that I had invested into those shares. Because over a period of time, the shares compounded. I got bonus issues, I got splits, I got dividends. With all of that, when I finally sold those shares off just before the pandemic, I actually got 20 times the value. So my first tryst with money actually taught me the eighth wonder of the world, which is something that as a chartered accountant I'm constantly talking about, the power of compounding.
Absolutely.
It's something that all of us, especially the youth of today, would do very well to remember, that short term is short gain, long term is long gain. Staying invested is so powerful, and constantly adding to those old investments is more powerful than you can imagine today. Imagine, what I put away as an 18-year-old gave me 20 times that money.
Absolutely. The power of compounding is something that really people actually overlook. And it's something that if you start early on, start young, I think the benefits of it are like amazing over the long term.
So for me, my early tryst with money just simply taught me that sometimes a wise decision can really pay off in the long run.
While you were growing up, were there like typically, parents then didn't engage with children much in conversations around money? You said your mom was, somebody who's really influenced your life, your parents. What were the conversations around money when you were growing up that really helped you kind of start when you were very young and which has grown with you?
In my family, because I had progressive parents, I was encouraged to think about money wisely. But one very important part of those conversations was about passive income. My mom always kept telling me, even when I was working as a chartered accountant with a Big Four firm, that you should always have some quiet money that comes into your account every single month. It could be in the form of interest, it could be in the form of rental income, it could be royalty on a book you've written, it could be money from a video you've made, whatever. Nowadays, your options are endless. But one very important thing that my mother kept telling me is that you should have some kind of passive income on the side, because should you choose to take a break from work, should you choose to not be a full-time professional because you need to raise children or you need to look after aging parents, You should have money that comes into your account on the side that takes care of your needs and even your wants. If you're in the privileged position of not having to take care of your needs, then even for your wants, you should not have to draw upon your corpus. So one critical piece of advice that I kept getting from my mom, especially, as a teenager in my early 20s, was about creating passive sources of income. And today, after having 3 children, I just cannot underestimate the importance of that advice. Money is not your ultimate goal, but money is your ultimate tool. Because it is what you need to buy your freedom, whether it is freedom of choice or even sometimes freedom of voice.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's always, like you said, very good to have something that you're doing that you're passionate about, which is over and above what you're doing professionally. Also, that's going to kind of, help you to kind of do anything that you want beyond what the money that you're earning from your professional, from your career can help you. With all these lessons that you learned earlier on in life, how did these translate into real experiences once you became a mother? What is it that these experiences, when you were growing up, your experiences with money, how did they translate into when you became a mother and the financial lessons that you've now, taking forward with your children?
So see, what I just spoke about is the ideology, right? The ideology to have that passive income. How did I convert that into my reality? Now, we can all live with certain ideologies, but converting that into your reality takes some very tough decisions. So I remember when we had our first child, my husband and I, we sat down and we had a conversation on how we wanted to shape our finances going forward. Till then, we were a very typical, I would say middle class Indian couple, going for those holidays abroad, buying whatever we, aspired to have, changing our car every few years, all of those things. What changed is that we decided to defer some of those purchases. We became a little bit more wise with our money. So instead of changing your car every 4 or 5 years, which used to be the norm with us, we said, okay, we don't need to do this. Because that EMI that's going out of your account every month is actually an expense because it's a depreciable asset. Similarly, if I can choose maybe do one domestic holiday instead of multiple international holidays every year, or for example, if I'm constantly buying branded clothes, maybe stick to more economical options once in a while, or even make that choice between need and want. Those were smaller decisions we made. While that is one part of it, the bigger choice we made was what kind of money we're going to put away on the side. Because that is something that people typically make a mistake in, rationing their income. Now, when you make money, every month you have a list of things that money is going to get spent on. But if you don't curtail the amount of money that is going to be flowing out of your account, you're never going to be left with enough money to put away. So that was a shift we made, that we said, okay, this is the amount of money that we're going to put away every month. What gets left over has to be reasonable enough to cover our immediate needs and maybe some wants, but it cannot be the other way, that whatever is getting left over, that gets parked. So that was the big change that we made as parents, because we realized that the needs are never going to come down. Once you have a child, right, the list of expenses doesn't go down.
Always, yeah.
And it's something that I talk about a lot of times, that the choice to have a child is actually also a financial decision. It is an emotional decision. It is a physical decision. It is a lifestyle decision. But above all of these, it is a financial decision. So the moment you choose to have a child, the way you look at your money, the way you look at your finances changes 360 degrees. And the choice between living your life and building a life is something that you end up making with every major expense. It changes how you structure your finances.
Aarti, you've written this very interesting, book titled "The Cost Price of Having a Baby." So, can you tell me a little bit more about, what are some of the financial aspects that people, often underestimate? So, if you can tell me a little bit more about, your book, what it covers, and what are the things that people underestimate?
So, upfront, Revati, the first thing that people underestimate is actually just the cost of having a child. And the reason why my book is titled Cost slash Price of Having a Baby is for that exact same reason. The cost of having a child is what you need to pay your doctor and for all your tests and for the delivery. Okay, that is the actual financial cost. But the price you pay for having a child is actually much bigger than that. You might have to take a career break. You will definitely need more help around the house. Your food consumption changes. The kind of supplements you spend on changes. So the actual price of having a baby is not just monetary. It will affect your career. It will affect your lifestyle. It will affect every decision you make. You're not going to be able to stay out, partying or socializing till 4 a.m. every other day. You're not going to be able to spend on those lavish dinners like you were spending earlier because now suddenly you have responsibilities. You have a third person to feed. You're not going to be able to stay at work as a newborn's mother for 16 hours like you were earlier. So it might affect your promotion. It might affect your next year's bonus. So the price of having a baby is actually far more significant. And what I talk about in this book is actually just that if you really want to have a child, what should you think about before getting into that decision? In India, everybody tells you, तुम बच्चा पैदा कर लो, हम संभाल लेंगे. लेकिन बच्चा पैदा करने से पहले, what are those decisions that you need to make? Nobody tells you that. My woke mom didn't tell me, my woke mother-in-law didn't tell me. I realized after doing this 3 times over that there were things I could have done better every single time. And I said, I have to put that down somewhere. In fact, the biggest compliment I received for my book was actually by someone who has children who are in college now. And she said, your book is very common sense. Coming from an experienced mom of 2 to say that it's actually common sense is more important than sounding earth-shatteringly different, because that's all I was trying to pile into those pages. How to look at your career, where to buy a house or to rent a house, which city to build your career in. Are you going to be close to your parents or your in-laws? Who's going to be able to provide that support when you go to work? Who's going to be able to come and help you look after your kid when you are unwell, right? Which city has better schools? Which neighborhood has a playground? Where are the potential classes that you might want to enroll your child in? If you go and buy a cheap house just because it's in an upcoming locality where the per square foot rental is lower, you may realize later that the cost of commute has more than compensated for the lower EMIs.
That's right, yeah.
You may be stuck with poorer schools, which means that your child may be given fewer opportunities going forward. You may be stuck in a place from where you cannot get a better paying job. So all of those are decisions that any couple that chooses to go in for a child needs to make before having the kid. Of course, you can deliberate these things later on, you can change those choices. But aren't we all going to be better parents and inherently happier human beings if you've had the time and the foresight to think these things through before having the child? And that is the whole point of writing this book, to tell people who want to have children 5, 10, 15 years down the line or 2 years down the line, that think about these things before you jump into it. Because having a baby doesn't have a return policy. It's a decision you made for life. You need to commit yourself 100% emotionally, physically, and financially.
Today, the social media is full of financial influencers. So what are the kind of conversations, you being financially savvy, financially empowered, know so much about money and money management, what are the kind of conversations that you have with your, kids?
So this is going to get some amount of hate, but I think one piece of disservice that we are all doing to our children's childhood is forcing the concept of money too early onto them. I personally believe that children need to be taught about money from their early teens. Pushing that onto them too early takes away the benefit of being a child. But the kind of conversations that you should be having with your kid, no matter what age they are more about being environmentally sustainable, about being an eco-warrior versus being an eco-demon. These are two words that are thrown around a lot in my household. Every time my kid wants to open a new return gift, which is a set of crayons, when he already has 2 boxes of crayons lying in his school bag, my question to him is, do you want to be an eco demon or do you want to be an eco warrior? So the idea as a parent is to make your child aware of usefulness and need before the concept of value and price come into the picture. You start with talking to your child about what they really need. If they already have one of something, do they really need another of it, right? It's something we would all do well to practice even as adults. We're all living very maximalistic lives where we're buying a lot of, shoes and clothes and accessories and watches, multiple cars sometimes. We're changing our mobile phones every 2 years. The question we need to ask ourselves and therefore set a precedent to your child about is need versus want.
Through your work on Womanly Matters, what are some of the gaps that you see in financial discipline amongst women, especially mothers?
So, Revati, the gaps are at 3 levels in my experience. And I've spoken to a lot of women, through my earlier years as a professional, as an entrepreneur, as a mom. And I would classify them at 3 stages. The first one is awareness and knowledge. Even friends of mine, former colleagues who are still working professionals, who are making independent income, right? Even they don't have the awareness of where their money is being invested. A lot of them are probably relying on their husbands, their fathers or their father-in-law to make those investments. There's nothing wrong with that. Letting somebody handle it for you, there's nothing wrong with it. But the problem is not even being aware of what is happening.
Yeah.
The second stage is courage and confidence. Now, unless you have the awareness that you are not doing something or not doing something right, you're not going to try to fix it. You're not going to learn about it. And therefore, the knowledge will not come. And unless that knowledge comes, you're never going to build on the courage to do something. Without that knowledge, the confidence to work on that courage is not going to be there. So, once you have the awareness and the knowledge that you need to do more when it comes to your financial decisions, your investments, then you build the courage and the confidence. And unless you have the courage and the confidence, you're never going to take initiative. What I have seen as a pattern across the board in most women is that unless they are pushed to do it, or unless they're forced into a situation where they don't have a choice, they are not taking the initiative to take ownership of their investment decisions. At a very basic level, I'll give you an example. So many women these days drive cars. How many of us actually decide which car to buy? Most of us, when we buy that car, it's on the basis of advice given to us either by our husband or our father-in-law or our brother or a friend. How many of us in a country where one of the most iconic cars like the Thar was designed by a woman actually have the knowledge of how to decide which car to buy? And that is where the change needs to come. That unless we take that ownership and unless we take the initiative, we are not going to change how we are dealing with money. That is one of the biggest gaps that I see in my work, because my entire point of Womanly Matters was talking to women who are making money on their own. These are women who are very successful professionally, and you will find them everywhere you go. Women who are making their own money, but who are not making their own decisions. And that needs to change.
Across your journey, whether it's motherhood, entrepreneurship, or navigating life's challenges, what is that one constant thing about money that has stayed with you?
The one lesson that has stayed constant across all aspects of life for me is diversification. We all talk about diversifying our investments, but the first thing that we all need to diversify is our sources of income. Having a full-time job is great. Having a full-time profession is great. But if you don't build alternative sources of income, if you need to make a choice of having to give up a full-time career or cutting down the number of hours you work or wanting to do different things, you're never going to be able to make that choice. So the first thing that you need to diversify is your sources of income. The second thing obviously is diversifying your investments. Like they say, never put all your eggs in one basket. Having tangible assets, real assets like a home or some kind of real estate or gold is important. At the same time, investing in shares, mutual funds, all of those things gives you a lot of liquid money. It gives you higher growth. So balancing those things is definitely very important from an investment point of view. And finally, diversifying how you live your life. I love being a mother. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. But I'm not only a mother. I am a working professional. I am a woman who likes to live her life, who has hobbies, who has friends, and I love having time for myself. So, the one thing that every woman, every mother needs to do is learn to treat every part of her life sacredly. Investing in her own health, investing in her relationships outside of home, investing in learning and in building who she is, all of that is very important from diversifying who you are as a person. Because at the end of the day, being a great mom is amazing, but being a great woman is equally important. So you need to diversify every aspect of your life, whether it's your income, your investments, or who you are as a person.
That's so interesting, Aarti. I mean, I definitely completely agree with you on the importance of diversifications, and you summarized it so well for us. That brings me to, my last question for you, Aarti, on, if there's one key takeaway of financial mindset that every mother listening to us today should take away from this conversation, what would that be?
Always build options. Even when you're working, when you have a full-time career, have an eye on what you could do if you needed to take a backseat from your career or if you wanted part-time working options. Build alternative sources of income. Build your passions, your hobbies, or even your professional self into someone who can build alternative sources of income outside of your full-time career. Because should you need to take time off or you want to commit more time, let's say, to raising your children or taking care of your aging parents, you should be in a position where you can still make money while doing all of that. It should never be this or that. Make yourself a person who can have this and that.
That's really, really so interesting, having a full-time career at the same time, pursuing your passion. I think that's really very nice takeaway that you've given to all mothers today. Aarti, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your journey so openly. What really stays with us from this conversation is how clearly you've shown that financial confidence isn't built in one big moment. It's built through small decisions, early awareness, and the willingness to keep learning through every life stage. And to everyone listening, if there's one thing this conversation reminds us, it's that money is not separate from life. It moves with us through every role we take on, especially as mothers. The key is not perfection, but starting early, staying aware, and having those simple, honest conversations at home. We hope this episode gives you a moment to reflect, reset, and maybe even begin one small step towards feeling more confident in your own financial journey. From all of us here, thank you for listening and wishing you a very happy Mother's Day.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.